I was having trouble with my internet for the longest time, as many of you have heard from some of my other streams. That and just getting back into the swing of things. So, yay! Or maybe not. Yay! I'm back streaming about the Hero gaming system. Hello, Wonder Goon. Um, so yeah, we're back. Looks like we're still having a little bit of trouble with our internet speed today. Hopefully it'll go well. And what happened to my last Hero stream won't happen again, and it'll be cut short, but we're going to try. That said, today I'm going to start doing some things where we discuss how to use the system for various genres, various specific story settings, more so than the builds, because I think we've covered a good bit about how to build things. There will be still some elements to that, but I want to start delving into how you can apply the system to particular settings and genres. That said, tonight's setting will be one that I hear a lot about, but don't see many people do, or even hear about people doing, and that is the Western genre. Now, as you can see from the PDF and everything, this is for the 4th edition. I use 5th edition, and where possible I will point out some differences between what this book will say and how it works with 5th edition. I will also go ahead and note that the current edition of the Hero system is 6th. So if you're interested, you see this and you get interested in the Hero system, the current edition is 6th edition, and it is got some marked differences from the 5th and 4th edition. The 4th and 5th are pretty similar. But all that said, the 4th and 5th are similar enough that all the supplements like Western Hero here definitely are compatible between these systems. So anyway, I recommend getting this particular PDF. It's almost impossible to find the book as a physical copy any longer. It's been out of print for, since the 1990s. So what does that mean? 30 some odd years now? Yeah. Anyway, so the book gets into some introduction, what is Western Hero, and uses some very nice woodblock copies of the old woodblock art type. And so then we get into character creation. And so here's the first step in dealing with any of the genres, any of the different milieus that you can get into. And that is, you've got to come up with a character concept. So whether it be space and science fiction or fantasy, you've got to have a notion of what your character is, what they're going to be before you can even begin to set up a character for it. And as a GM, you've got to understand the setting and what your characters will be, simply to be able to tell a good story. And after all, that's what it's all about. So you start out and it gives you some good suggestions. What is what is the base motivation? Loyalty, promoting a code, love, glory. And then you get into money. Do they love money? Revenge, the search. Are they looking for something? On and on and on and on. And this book is one of the best about giving you some of those basic motivations that get a character moving, and explaining them in context of the Western, which I suppose I should say something about, and give you an idea of where I'm coming from by explaining some of my favorite Westerns. my favorite movies of the genre are honestly things like the Clint Eastwood movies, Unforgiven, Outlaw Josie Wales, A Few Dollars More, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, so forth. But then there's some other modern ones, Quickly Down Under, wonderful Western, a lot of fun. Let's see, Wonder Goon says, and these motivations can be used in any genre, not just Western genre. He is completely correct about these motivations, and that is one of the wonderful things about the system. Things carry over one genre to another. So these motivations, they give examples in relation to the Western, but the overall concept of the motivation is applicable to any scenario. So keep that in mind. And so that's what we're doing. We're playing the Old West, the gunslingers and the shootouts, and more on the shootouts in a little bit. So yeah, you can also do characters based on the player. Personally, I don't like doing that. I grew up in an era and started role-playing in an era where people were afraid of role-playing games and what people were doing with them. And so I just have a personal mistrust of trying to play yourself, as it were. Again, it's a completely personal hang-up, and it's, completely due to that time period and time frame of the late 70s, early 80s, and the bad press that games got, and trying to show everybody, hey, the character's not me. And Wonder Goon says, same. He and I are about the same age. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that time frame, what? That's ridiculous. Yes, it was. But it ingrained some patterns. Wonder Goon says he's younger and better looking, and I cannot disagree. I'm pretty much a mess myself. So let's see. Then there's putting it all together. And so then we get into some of the build stuff. Package deals. And this is one of the differences between 4th and 5th edition, and I'll get into exactly what in just a second. Both use the idea, editions use the idea of this package deal. That there are certain skills or attributes or abilities that are common to a profession or a concept. So for instance, for a bounty hunter, they're familiar with small arms. That's a weapon familiarity, by the way, and common melee weapons. They have some criminology, writing, stealth, tracking, and a knowledge skill, wanted criminals. They know who their quarry is. So then they take the disadvantages of watched by authorities and watched by criminals. I would disagree with that being a watched, because most criminals are not going to take highly to bounty hunters and are actually going to do more than just watch them. Watching meaning they're keeping an eye on them, making sure they don't step out of line or anything like that. So, criminals and bad guys are going to do a little more than watch a bounty hunter. So with that in mind, what this package deal does is it gathers all these necessary skills, or talents, or perks, or what have you, together, throws on some disadvantages, and you end up with a package cost that it costs you to be that profession, that concept. And this is so that there's some continuity, some sameness. Bounty hunters, they're going to have some comparable skills, no matter who it is. So think of it kind of like your class. That said, the difference between these packages in 4th edition and 5th edition is in 4th edition, they granted this package bonus thing. And what that was is because not all of these skills are as equally useful, they said, hey, give a break on the cost of the package. Um, Fifth edition did away with that. Now, the reason being is because there was no table, no chart, no nothing that allowed you to figure out what the package bonus should be. It was purely the GM's discretion of, well, that's a lot of skills that they have to buy, so we're going to give them a pretty good 3-point break on all that, which is a cost of a skill. So that said, other problems with it were that it's not really a disadvantage, and it's not really XP, so how do you put it into the character build? And the answer is well, you really can't. So in 5th edition, they pretty much did away with this package bonus idea, and I pretty much, as you might guess, agree. If there'd been some kind of table or chart, if the package cost this many points, give this much package bonus, I might have felt differently. But as it was, yeah, I was in agreement with the dropping of the package bonus. But sorry, I'm having trouble with pollen here, and being asthmatic, it's not helping any. So packages for Western Hero include such things as bounty hunter, cowboy, gambler, lawman, mountain man, Native American brave. That gets a little dicey, but remember this book came out in the 90s. There are a lot of Native American tribes. Not all of them had braves. And this is the stereotypical from the old Western movies. Yeah, that package could probably be X'd out. That said, there's the outlaw, private detective, prospector, U.S. cavalry soldier. So now we get into one of the build questions. How do you put in to good old hero designer one of these packages? Well, let's pick one first. Wondergoon, do you have a favorite of all of these? Give him a second to reply. Let's do a simple cowboy. Okay, I'm not yet going to get into a full-on build, but I'm going to show you how to put these package elements in there. And so the easiest and best way in my mind to do it is to do it as a prefab, a new prefab cowboy. You could do it as a template, but yeah, that gets into a little more trickiness and doesn't allow for any of the variability like this package doesn't, but some packages give you a choice of a set of choose 3 from this set of skills. And if you do it as a template, that variability is really kind of taken out because the template starts with those. So looking at the skills, let's look back at the cowboy. We've got 3 weapon familiarities: lariat, small arms, and common melee weapons. So we come down here, and weapon familiarity, and common melee weapons. And small arms. And now let's see if they even have lariat. They probably do somewhere in here. But let's say they don't. Yeah, I agree with Wonder Green. Let's just do it that way. Let me find it. Let's note it as net, and then create a note. That the net skill works with is a placeholder for the lariat. You could also come up here and do custom skill. Let's see, where is it? Well, yeah, custom skill, and add it in that way. That could be a little bit of a hassle too. Ah, so small arms apparently includes some weapons that are not. Yeah. So handguns, shotguns, good call on West rifles. Good call on Wonder Goon's part, noticing that small arms included all these modern weapons and science fiction weapons like Gauss guns and so forth. So there we go. It ended up being the same cost because they don't charge you more than 2, even if you click 3 for that category. So there we are. That gets those skills in. And then we had writing. And what was the other one? Area knowledge and local ranchers. Okay. So these are knowledge skills. Good old knowledge skills. One is an area. And one is just a knowledge skill of local ranchers. Now, this is not to say, and in fact, in a genre such as this whole screen should probably, for even a cowboy, be lit up with skills. Knowledge skills, local lawmen. Cowboy should probably know that. Knowledge skill, cattle trails, things like that. But this is the basic package of what is needed to be a cowboy. So we also have watched by employer, more powerful, NCI, only watching. Knowledge skill, where to punch a cow to get milk. Yes. Now this is again where I as a GM will take some discrepancy with the published version. Let's see, what level? 11 or less. So your boss is watching you. He is definitely a more powerful than. He is only watching, keeping an eye on you. Now, the book is published, gives him NCI, Extensive Non-Combat Influence. I disagree with that, so I'm going to leave it off. And so there we go. We now have our prefab all listed out. And we can save it with the rest of our prefabs. Professions. And we'll create a new folder. Western. Yeehaw. Right? And cowboy. Okay, so now to show you, let's do a new character. 5th edition rules, heroic, and let's come up here and load a prefab, cowboy. And now we come here to skills, click over here to prefabs, and voila. There's our skills for the package of being a cowboy. We can even come over here to disadvantage, and we got cowboy, and we've got his hunted. And so now we can easily start loading in these things once we get all of this stuff made up as a prefab. And you can see why I might say go with it as a prefab instead of a template. Okay, so now we're going to unload all templates. I'm going to close the character. No, I'm not going to save any changes for the moment. Alright. We may build a character in just a little bit. For the moment, yeah. Oh, Hero Designer software, yes. As Wondergoon mentions, for those interested in the Hero Designer software, you can find it at herogames.com. It's $25, but or at least it was the last time I checked. It is a lifesaver for working with this system. It makes character generation so much easier because it takes care of a lot of the math and the tracking of points and everything for you. So it's a really good system. I highly recommend it as, again, something else if you're going to get into this system. So that's the packages, and that's at least the start of building a character. Like I said, we may go ahead and finish it out here in just a little bit, or at least take a look at a character, because I built one for when someone was going to possibly run a game, and we may look at it. Not to disparage, it takes a lot of effort to run a game, and you've got to have interest, and he and I seem to be the only ones interested in working with Western stories. Okay, so then it gets into skills, and I'm going to stop right here. Characteristic and skill ranges. This is characteristic ranges. Your characteristics should be limited in this type of setting, unless it's a fantastic or sci-fi setting, to what's considered normal human maximum. Normal human maxima is 20 for most characteristics. And so they give you a nice little chart here of what the range on the characteristics means. Like on average, if you have an 8 to 12 on a characteristic, you're average. You're got what everybody's got. 13 to 15 is notable, and that's something that a lot of people mess up. They so want their character to be effective as they possibly can, and so they think that automatically means they should have 20s in the appropriate characteristics, and it's like, that's just not the case. That's just not true. You're going to be notable and causing a reaction for a 13. People are going to note you and say, yes, that guy's strong for a 13 strength. So keep that in mind when you're designing your characters, and don't go too overboard. As to what characteristics, strength is always a good one. There was a more rough and tumble world then. Dexterity, if you're going to be a gunfighter or that type of character, you definitely want dexterity, because otherwise you're just going to be left in the dust, probably literally. Body is one of your two types of hit points. When you run out of body, you're dead. When you run out of, let's see, where is it? Stun over here, you're knocked unconscious. So having some body, min-max that a little bit. Let's be real. Nobody likes having to make a new character because your old one got dead. But in this genre, you kind of have to have a little bit of get ready for it, because it's going to happen. So then there's ego. Ego in this type of setting was probably not as necessary. It is a willpower roll, so you probably want some, but you're not going to be lacking if you don't. And then there's presence, Presence is a combination of like your physical intimidation, how intimidating you look, the aura you can project, like a lawman saying freeze, and that's actually an example of a presence attack. And you can defend against presence attacks with either your ego or your presence itself. I mean, if you're a big rough and tumble guy, you're not going to be as impressed by a lawman saying freeze as, somebody else might be. So that's characteristics. And we move on to skills. And the skill list is extensive for Hero System. But they start out with the idea of there's certain skills everyone has, and those are called everyman. And the bottom line is you can put them on your character sheet. You have an 8 or less roll for them, and it costs you 0 points. Normally, an 8 or less roll is 1 point. So if you ever want to improve any of these everyman skills, you have to pay that 1 point first to actually get the skill. Then you move on. And those skills for the Western everyman: climbing, concealment, conversation, deduction, shadowing, stealth, transport, familiarity, horses. Most people can ride a horse as long as they're not doing anything fancy, or the horse isn't galloping away and things like that. It is very tough to stay on a galloping horse, by the way, folks. It can be rather nerve-wracking, too. You have, your native language that you can speak. In this setting, writing may not be standard, though, reading and writing. You know your home country, and you have a professional skill that you can do. So, certain skills are just modified, like bugging, eavesdropping. Well, what kind of skill is eavesdropping? Well, that's the skill of listening in and not being noticed for the fact that you're listening in. In the Lord of the Rings movie, Samwise Gamgee failed his eavesdropping role, and Gandalf saw him and whacked him. Same thing applies in this type of setting and genre. You can be listening and not look like you're listening in on a conversation, and that's what that role would be. But something like combat piloting, that's just not going to be available. The closest thing they had to an airborne vehicle would have been a balloon, and that's not exactly pilotable aircraft. So, or at least not one that you can combat pilot, that's for sure. Computer programming, there's no computers then. And Wonder Goon, I never drop no eaves, sir. So this also gives you a look at the availability, how common certain skills were in this type of setting. For instance, demolition is an uncommon skill in the Western setting. It's an uncommon skill in the modern setting, but, be that as it may. Martial arts is uncommon. Pretty much, I would say it is pretty much unavailable other than good old fisticuffs and maybe some boxing. You're definitely not, unless you're going for the old kung fu show type Western feel, you're certainly not going to see anybody practicing wushu or karate or taekwondo or any of these things. So martial arts, as a GM, be very, very, very mindful of the fact that this is a Western genre, not a martial arts genre. Unless, again, that's the feel you're going for. So they give a whole slew of descriptions on it. There were a lot of Chinese workers who built the railroads, so you could learn it from that source. Wonder Goon brings up a good point I had forgotten about. There were a lot of Chinese workers, so you could have picked up a little from them. They tended to keep to themselves, but you could have picked up some from them, or you could be one of those Chinese railway workers. And he also points out that, yes, we are aware that not every Asian individual knows martial arts. We're simply pointing out that he's correcting me that the potential for someone to know martial arts outside of fisticuffs and boxing and just good old wrestling, it is a possibility after all. So I stand corrected. Um, Skill enhancers, these are some wonderful things that a lot of people don't take advantage of. Jack of all trades allows you to cheaply have professional skills and arm long. Linguist lets you get languages all day long and twice on Sunday. Scientist is probably not so much useful in this type of setting. Uh, you know, there were sciences, and they point out that there are some things that could be used: the telegraph, phonograph, camera. A lot of these things were originated in this type of setting, in this type of time frame, and therefore you might actually be okay in taking science skill chemistry, science skill electricity, electronics. Electronics might be pushing it, but electricity and electrical gear might work. But you get the idea. Scholar, you have a lot of knowledge skills. You know about history, knowledge skill history, so forth. Traveler, this helps you get pick up area knowledges, city knowledges, cultures, and things like that. Uh, Scientists would be helpful if you take medicine or veterinary medicine. Yes. Uh, Good point there. If you're making the town doctor for your Western character, he might be a scientist. And therefore, yeah. Well connected helps you buy down the cost of contacts. Um, Contacts are definitely a helpful thing. It's good to know the local lobbying. It's good to know bankers. It's good to know, this is how you get jobs. This is how you get, find out information, all that sort of thing. And so then the first thing under perks is contacts. Yay. Um, so, yeah. And then there's favors, followers, fringe benefits. Um, Good old money. Let's see, what is one of you? You are who you know. Street proverb. He's bringing in a Shadowrun reference on me now, but it's not incorrect. Contacts are probably something else that a character in a heroic level setting, such as Western Hero, should probably have. Most of the talents. Well, I guess I should note about fringe benefits. Fringe benefits help you to practice, give you the license to practice a profession. The bottom line is you can practice the profession without the license, but now if you get found out, you're a charlatan, you're a trickster, a confidence man, and in a lot of places that'll bring criminal charges against you. So it might be worth it to have that 1 point professional license. If the GM, and here to the GMs as well, if the GM does not feel it's going to be an important point, then you should probably not charge that cost. If your doctor character, being a doctor, a licensed professional, could play a role in the stories that are told, then you will need to spend that 1 point. The bottom line is if it's not going to affect gameplay, it's not worth any points. If it might or is going to affect gameplay, then now it requires points. So if you want to be a sheriff, yes, you're going to need to spend that 2 points. Sheriffs carry a lot of weight in a Western setting. Similarly, if you're a U.S. Army sergeant or major, colonel, or general, yeah, I'm not going to approve that personally. But they have rank and status that can be beneficial to playing the game and getting information and getting equipment, even. So these are the fringe benefits, the perquisites. So keep that in mind. So we're moving on to talents. One of the most important, and the one I'm going to really worry about, is fast draw. Uh, Fast draw is exactly what it sounds like. It is a dex-based skill, so the better your dex, the better your fast draw. Uh, but it comes into play whenever two characters simultaneously use a held action, and only then. Because here's the deal, and they get into this later on. Here's the deal. You step out at high noon to have a shootout with somebody. Well, if you have a higher speed so that you get an action before they do, and you just pull out your pistol and shoot them, you are now guilty of murder. Wait a minute, what? I'm faster than they are. No. You, bottom line, just gun them down in cold blood. How a shootout works is if you are the faster, have the higher speed, and get an action first, you hold your action. And then it can be just a cycle of holding action and holding action and holding action. And so the two of you now have actions at the same time, and somebody makes a move. You roll the fast draw, who got the shot off first. If you don't hold that action so that your actions go at the same time, you just gunned them down. You just committed murder. Alright? So, fast draw for any of you would-be gunslingers out there is an important and vital skill. Because otherwise you're just left with your dex roll. And probably at a minus because you don't have the fast draw. Okay? Because there is a skill. There is tricks to that. But the other reason you might want to do it is it is cheaper, costs less character points overall to raise a skill by +1 than it does a characteristic by +1, especially with dex. So fast draw is probably a very important skill, and one probably a lot of our very important talent, I should say. So it's something that you really want to have on any gunslinger type character. Yeah, Wondergoon points out a gunslinger without fast draw is a dead gunslinger. This is absolutely and very true. So, I think in 5th edition, let me do a new character, heroic. I think in 5th edition, fast draw is a skill, whereas in 4th edition, it was a talent. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because it's listed under talents. So there's another difference between 4th edition, which is where this Western book comes from, and 5th edition hero system. Fast draw in 5th edition is a skill, not a talent. Alright. So, yeah, if you plan on slapping any kind of leather, pick up fast draw. Disadvantages. Dependence is one that might be even more likely because a lot of people were hooked on things like cocaine and laudanum. Let's see, what is that? Heroin? Not heroin. Yeah, no. I forget what the other. It's an opiate. Laudanum was, and a lot of people were addicted to these things. So alcohol. So dependence is opium. That's it. That's the one I was looking for. Opium. Derp. Wow. I'm on point tonight, folks. So when you get to doing disadvantages, dependence is usually one that a lot of people overlook. But in this setting, it's quite possible and quite probable that it's a good one to choose. By the way, they get into the fact that powers are generally not available in Western Hero. I will point out that that may not be the case with yours. You may want a mystical element to your Western game. And therefore, there are some magic that represents powers. So just keep in mind there is some play with some of these suggestions. Uh, so keep that, yeah, just keep that in mind. Distinctive features. This could be things like tattoos, baby face, city slicker. Yes, in this type of setting, somebody from the cities is going to stick out like a sore thumb out in the frontier. Just the way it is. We tend to scoff at that idea nowadays, but we live in a fairly thoroughly urbanized uh, framework now, so that people from the city don't stick out quite as much when they go out into the frontier, the country. There's just no frontier left anymore, folks. Um, so always wears a large white sombrero. I'm going to sit here and say that's probably not a distinctive feature so much as that's a cyclim. Because if you always wear that, that's a psychological hang up. I got to wear my sombrero. It may make you distinctive, but it's kind of a silly thing, is what I'm saying. Um, Physical limitations, lack of proper medicine left a lot of people with limps and scars, and well, scars wouldn't be a physical limitation, but gimp legs, bad arms, lost fingers, lost eyes, all sorts of things like that. I mean, how many westerns have a guy with an eye patch because he lost an eye, right? Um, Psychological limitations, I don't care the genre. This is where a lot of people are going to get a lot of their disadvantage points. Uh, Notable ones here: the Code of the West. Essentially, this is the same thing as honorable. You always keep your word, never take advantage of an unfair situation, and always fight fair when possible. This is the Code of the West. It's a more fantastical, and you're going to see that a lot less often if you're trying to emulate movies like The Unforgiven, or Quigley Down Under. But that's debatable in that latter case as well. The sombrero would be distinctive in some areas. For example, in northern Dakota, a sombrero would be a lot more rare. Yes, yes. Or more accurately, the Dakota territories. Yes. Keep that in mind too, but we'll get to some of that in a minute. Um, Codes of vengeance were quite common. You know, you've got to avenge an insult. Drunkard goes along with dependence. Uh, Chances are, if you have the dependence, alcohol, what happens is if you don't drink alcohol within a certain amount of time, you start getting weak. You start losing your skills. You start losing your attributes. Drunkard is the psychological limitation that goes along with it, that you seek out drinks. You actively go, hey, I'm going to check out the saloon, and things like that. Um, so keep that in mind. Let's see. Gunslinger mentality. That's another one that needs some. This does not mean you necessarily sling guns at every that drop of a hat. This simply means that you think you're the best at a particular thing, or your character does, thinks they're the best at a particular thing. Therefore, when somebody else comes along who's supposedly good at it, you've got to go put them in their place. You're the best. So that could be with guns, or it could be with just about anything. But it's that mentality. It's called the gunslinger mentality because in a lot of these movies, you know, I hear you're pretty fast with the gun, right? That sort of thing is a common trope in this setting. So, hence the title of that type of thinking, that you've got to prove you're the best, is gunslinger mentality. Um, Cattlemen and sheep herders. There were a lot of both out in the Old West, and they hated each other. Basically, sheep leave the ground barren because they pull grass up by the roots. when they eat it. Cows just clip off the grass and it grows back. So cattlemen hated sheep herders because they basically left the ground unusable, and sheep herders hated cattlemen because the cattlemen would come and try to do things to harass and run off the sheep herders and things like that. So there we go. Just like there are people who have codes versus killing, there is the killer. That's a psychological limitation. You just you're vicious, you're mean, you're nasty, you kill people. Uh, Again, one of my favorite westerns is The Unforgiven, modern Clint Eastwood. Uh, Eddie Money, I think not Eddie Money, William Money, the lead character played by Clint Eastwood, uh, would have had this disadvantage when he was younger in his life. Because, as he put it, he's pretty much killed everything that's walked or crawled upon the face of the earth. So, the killer, it's a psychological limitation. You're going to be hard pressed when somebody annoys you not to just whip out the pistol and smoke them. Um, Loner here is one that I suggest should probably only be used for an NPC. Um, Bye.
I'll be around next weekend.
All right. Sorry, I was saying goodbye to somebody. Um, Loner. Probably not the best of disadvantage to take when you're in a cooperative storytelling environment. Um, you know, just saying, I usually frown these days upon people who try to play loners or lone wolves. Definitely don't like it if they're going to keep it around. If they're not, the plan isn't to eventually buy it off as they become less of a loner, as they get attached to the other PCs and things like that. So, but it's beautiful for an NPC, or can be good if, um, what am I trying to say here? If it's just the GM and one player. So keep that in mind. Prejudice was unfortunately a big thing in the late 1800s, early 1900s, so it'd be amiss to not have it in there. Unfamiliar with society, that would be your mountain man type scenario. Upholds law and order. You get the idea. So finally, susceptibilities and vulnerabilities. Susceptibility is probably not something you're going to see much of. A susceptibility is in general something where the character takes damage from something that doesn't normally damage anyone. So for instance, Superman is susceptible to kryptonite. Okay? He takes damage just from being around it, where the rest of us are around kryptonite and who cares? So you're probably not going to see too many susceptibilities in this type of setting. But vulnerabilities, that's where you take extra damage from an attack. So that can be something of the sort where you have a bad leg, so you take extra damage when you take a shot to the leg, or a punch or a kick to the leg, or something like that. Although kicking is right out, that's not fighting fair, right? So, they list out, you can choose to take 1.5 times the normal stun damage from an attack to that one location, or 2 times the stun to that one location, or something like that. It's probably not a good idea to take a vulnerability that includes more than one location. I mean, this is going to be a deadly game to begin with. You don't want to take it right off the rails. So watch out for vulnerabilities, but they are definitely appropriate. Glassjaw, as an example, takes 2 times stun from location 5, which is on the head, and it's worth 10 points. You take a shot to the jaw, you're going to go unconscious. That sort of thing. Okay? So, and I'm just really kind of going through this book and trying to show you out. They give you some nice tips for good role play. Speak your character's parts. Say howdy, partner. Howdy, bartender. Give me a bottle of your best whiskey. No, none of that watered down swill. You feed the yokels. I want the good stuff, the stuff you keep in the back. Be colorful. Have fun. Chances are, if you're wanting to play in this type of genre, you've seen the movies. Work with it. Or you've read the novels. I got to admit, I've never read any of the Western novels, the Western literature. And welcome back, Wonder Goon. But, they go into things like that. Western combat rules give you a lot of room to try almost anything you want. Use this. So, again, and then there's rule number 9, which is true of any genre. Remember, the GM is not your enemy, or he shouldn't be, or she shouldn't be. And GMs, your players, are not your enemy, okay? You're there to have a good time. You're there to tell a story together. Wonder Goon, I haven't read any Western novels, but I love a lot of Western movies. Exactly. I'm right there with you, man. Alright, so then we get into combat. And they get into things like gun malfunctions. The guns at this time could explode easily. Or not easily, but they could explode. They could misfire. And when that happens, the bullet is actually lodged in the barrel. So you've got to sit here and spend time dislodging the bullet from the barrel to get your gun working. And then there's a jam. That's where one of the rounds jams into the firing mechanism, and you can't get it out to load a new round. So you've got to clear the jam. Then there's a dud. The round doesn't fire. You can now eject it and everything, but you wasted your round. Your action trying to shoot, and the round was the shot was a dud. The powder was wet or something, and it just didn't fire. So you've got to pull it out. You don't have to clear it. You just drop it out like normal and put a new one in. So they give you the rules for all of that. So if it's a metallic cartridge, it's unlikely to explode. But you do still have the misfire, jam, and dud. If it's an old cap and ball, it can explode. Gatling guns, misfire and jam. And they do it fairly regularly from what I heard of the historical records. And then cannons, which are a possibility still, can just flat out explode. So they get into that. They get into how weapons can be broken. They get into the fact that a lot of genres leave out, and the main rules leave this out. A lot of people, they get a target in their mind and they'll rush by another enemy to get through to them. These give you rules as a GM for how to deal with the player who does that. It's called ignoring a ready opponent. You've got an opponent that was in your way. You can't just rush by him with an impunity. You're at half DCV to that guy. He can hit you much easier. So these are things to keep in mind. Wonderful little tidbits and rules that are in this book. So moving right along. I'm actually going to move right along to the end. Just know that there's a lot of nice little maneuvers and everything. They clarify things like the snapshot, where you just take a quick shot, and such as that. But a lot of us end up going, yeah, I'm guilty myself. I like Westerns, but I just don't think I could come up with, the adventures and the scenarios to play with that. And all I could say to that is one, they give you a nice historical timeline of what was going on in the Old West at that time. And they give you a timeline for Deadwoods in particular and general Old West. They give you a map of Old Deadwood. And then these lovely little scenarios. These are the people that you meet. Here's some ideas for how to do it. So, wonderful book. The point is, go back and watch some of these old movies. And let's see, Wonder Goon said this was a rule that was written years before D&D 3.0 Attack of Opportunity rules as well. Yes. Which, I'm going to say it, Wizards of the Coast stole from the Hero Games. He said it. What he's talking about is that moving by a readied opponent. In D&D 5th edition, you now get an attack of opportunity against somebody when they try to do that sort of thing. But Hero System here, this book in particular was published way before 5th edition AD&D. In fact, when this book was published, the current edition of AD&D was 2nd edition, the best edition, by the way. But that's a completely different stream. The point I'm trying to make out is they give wonderful little backgrounds in this book, settings. So even if you haven't read the books, even if you haven't seen more than a few movies, which I recommend, go watch some westerns, please. And they do. It's full of some wonderful little flavor elements. And if you really want to try your hand at running a Western game or playing in a Western game, I highly recommend this book. It is still available. Drive-Thru RPG has the PDF, and it's for a fairly reasonable price. And you can do what I'm doing right now and scroll through it and read it. And then here's what I was talking about, the mini scenarios. Mixed Up Mabel. The lady just walks up to one of the PCs and starts talking about, I haven't seen you in so long, Roy. The children and me were getting hungry. That sort of thing. And the bottom line is she's trying to grift you out of some money. And if you pay her off, that's great. If you instead just blow her off at everything, people will show up to say, no, you're not going to end up getting married to this. The character player is not going to end up married to this character. But it gives the characters a chance to role play. What do they do in this situation where some lady, bedraggled with kids on her skirt, walks up and just starts saying you're her husband? What do you do? And as they point out, Mabel is in truly desperate straits. So, maybe if your characters are the good guys, they'll end up helping her anyway. But, it's a nice little scenario that gives a lot of good flavor and a lot of chances to RP. The Kid Without a Cause is the old kid looking to make a name for himself. Presenting Kid Yanez. This is where somebody's promoting a boxing match, and if you get in the ring and you actually win, you've made a friend and then you won a little money. If you don't, come back tomorrow, that sort of thing. So they've got some wonderful scenarios, many little adventures, some introductory scenarios. The bottom line is, go out and have some fun. This is what you do with every one of the genres, every one of the scenarios. But this is the Western. And so I'm going to try to do what I said I was. Let's actually, I made up a Western character for a potential game at one point. Let me see if I can find him. I apparently can't. Well. So I can't show you a character, and I'm not going to try to make one at the moment. Because I've been running my mouth at you for an hour. Western Hero is probably the best genre book in the hero games ever produced. In Wonder Goon is saying that's in his opinion. I will have to agree. I'm a big fan of using it for my fantasy settings, but the fantasy hero books branched out, and there's 3 different books for them in the 4th edition, plus the grimoires and everything, and they were never quite as tight and concise as this Western was. So honestly, it is one of the best books. It is a good book to get just on principle. Will help you with other genres, as I was pointing out. Things like not rushing by a ready opponent, and such as that. So, on that note, I think I'm going to call it a stream, unless Wonder Goon has some, and it's just a good read too. Yes, 'cause like I said, it does have a brief outline of the history of the time period. A lot of people think that the Old West was so long ago. Well, it's about 100 years now that it ended. But the last of the Indian Wars didn't end until like 1913. So within 5 years of World War One. Holy crap. And it brings up points like that. It brings up that there were Model T Fords riding around in the Old West so keep that sort of thing in mind, and it's a great book. It's a great setting. It's a great genre. It's one where you can have a lot of fun. So go out, have some fun. Try out the hero system. I highly recommend it. This is just one of the settings that it can be used for. I'm going to start trying to go over some more. I don't necessarily have books for it, but I'm going to discuss elements. Kind of like I've done tonight, though I had a book to go with an outline. So, there you have it. Wonder Goon, do you have any other comments or questions or anything? The lurkers say good stream from Classic Daddy. Thank you. All right. Well, I hope I've given you the zest and vim and verve to go out and try some of these things. Wonder Goon does have a comment. I have nothing further except to say go buy the book from a reputable dealer and legally, and go buy the software from HeroGames.com. Absolutely. I know funds are tight nowadays, but support people who do work that you like. So, anyway, y'all have a good evening. I'll talk to you later. We'll see you next stream. Have a good one.